Are 3D printers going to print houses for $5,000 a piece? Let's talk about that. Okay, I want to first introduce this. This is my personal 3D printer. It's a IIIP. It's an i3 frame 3D printer. It feeds the filament through this hot end and then pours it onto the base plate, and then it can form 3D printed objects. Honestly, this technology is not that difficult. It's really just like a hot glue gun. And it's just a very precise hot glue gun, and it's controlled by a really sophisticated program driving the X, Y, and Z axis so that you can get the right pattern onto the plate. But every layer is just putting a little piece of plastic like a hot glue gun and then coming back and putting another layer on top of that previous layer. And then it stacks up in 3 dimensions. This technology is not that hard. Now there's other 3D printing technology that is very difficult, and you take oxygen away and you have this goo of plastic and there's lasers and all kinds of weird technology. But this technology is not that difficult. Now what you do if you want to print a 3D printed house in large scale, you make these nozzles much bigger, and instead of plastic, you use concrete. But at the end of the day, the technology is very similar. All you're doing is you have a X, Y, and Z motor system that allows the nozzle to be placed in the right area very precisely and drop concrete layer by layer until it builds up into a 3-dimensional space. This castle represents a 3D printed house in real life that was printed with a concrete printer. And I'll show you a picture up here of that 3D printed house. Now they just did the framework. They didn't put a roof on it. They didn't put wiring in it. It's just like a playhouse, but it proves the technology. If you want very weird shapes like these with a low cost, a 3D printer is fantastic for this. You can print all these different types of sculpture items like these towers and these circular items much cheaper than if you had to stick build it with wood and then cover it with plaster. So using a 3D printer for weird shapes like this really is more cost effective. So the big question is there going to be a big shift where we're all going to live in 3D printed concrete houses? Or are we going to still create stick-built wood-framed housing? So let's look at the economics, because the economics is truly what is always going to drive the decision on whether or not you're going to go with a concrete house or a wooden house. If the concrete house is half the price as the wooden house in square footage, you will see a migration of some people moving over to a concrete house. Now, they might complain it's cold or dingy or whatever, but if it's half the price for the square footage, you're going to see a large disruption and a migration of people into a concrete house versus a stick-built house. So let's get into the economics. So, cycle. This was a prototype and it took a long time, but there are many manufacturers out there in the US and specifically China that are building multiple houses in one day using a concrete printer. There's one company in China that can produce 10 houses in 24 hours using one printer. And they started doing this back in 2013. They perfected it and was running 10 houses a day in 2014. It's 2018 now. That means that China has had this technology for more than 4 years and has actually been producing product for over 4 years. The companies in the US are just now catching up with what China innovated on. And so the cycle is there. The cycle is definitely there. It's so much faster to print the house and have a robot work 24 hours out of the day to produce square footage in comparison to stick built, then come back with a whole bunch of other finishings. With a concrete printed house, like the one I saw from Minnesota, they have one printer in a circle and it produces a house, and there's only one attendant making sure that the windows go in place at the right time. And so he's just a window installer, and he doesn't have to work all day either. He just has to be there for when the windows have to go in. So the cycle is there. The cost of labor is definitely there. Once you do the upfront capital cost for the robot, you don't have a large crew of skilled labor doing all the framework and the foundation work and etc. You just have to have that window guy putting in windows where the robot is leaving the openings. So the labor cost is way down as well. Now, concrete versus wood, I've seen large debates on that, specifically with the 3D printer, because you have to build a framework. You can't just put one bead of concrete down. You actually have to have 2 beads of concrete with a mesh, if you will, in between that allows the wall structure to be very structurally sound. Now, are we going to have engineers refine that so that there's less concrete per layer? Absolutely. So over time, the cost of the concrete wall is going to come down, and also probably increase the speed as well. So the concrete versus wood cost is debatable, but if you just look at the overall labor cost, the cost of the house is going to go down. There's a new company that everybody's getting excited about because they're quoting $4,000 for the house. Now, I question that greatly. It might be $4,000 just for the concrete work, but I'm sure they're neglecting to show the cost of the robot. I'm sure they're neglecting to show the cost of the electricity. I'm sure they're neglecting to show the upfront cost. I'm sure they're neglecting to show the roof. The roof system that they put on that $4,000 house looked very complicated, many windows, and I doubt that they were adding that into the overall cost of the house as well. Now, but even with that being said, even if you could get the concrete structure down to $4,000, and that is the walls, the interior walls, the exterior walls, if you could just get that down to $4,000, and then add a roof system to it, and windows and doors and electricity, you're not talking about a lot of money. You might be hitting the $10,000, maybe $20,000 mark. So you might be able to get a 4-room house for maybe $20,000. A lot of people would love to have that technology and start mass producing housing at a very cheap level. If we could keep the cost down under $20,000 and have a 4-room house, many young people or people without families would be able to go into a house like that and start a life. If I had the option when I came out of college and I could go into a house for $20,000 instead of paying rent into an apartment, I definitely would have. So this is going to give an opportunity for especially young people to be able to get into a house, create a mortgage, pay off that mortgage very quickly, and not have that overhead cost of a large house or a rent of a large apartment. We talked about cycle, we talked about cost, and now let's talk about quality. Well, the quality of the concrete printings that I've seen has been very rough. However, if you throw a little bit of plaster on top, you could get a nice smooth finish, interior and exterior. Now if you look, it's very rough. The 3D printers have a hard time making sure that there's not any stringing going on. And so if I were to refine this I would have to take some sandpaper and some little knives and cut away some of the little trimmings that the 3D printer has left. In concrete, it's very similar. There's a little bit of a bubble effect for each layer of concrete, so the walls aren't smooth. But if you took a little bit of plaster, you could get a nice clean wall if you wanted to, or you could just leave it bare and show off the 3D printingness of the concrete house. So ultimately the quality is good, but it's not as nice looking as a stick-built house. However, the uniquenesses that a 3D printer can give you, like these archways, these turrets, these round walls, you can build out spirals, you can build out all kinds of different shapes with 3D printers, and the 3D printer is just going to do it. So in stick built, these uniquenesses cost a lot of money. So if you're really looking for a unique house, you could go with a 3D printed house and allow yourself to have all these weird, unique shapes, windows and doorways, and really cater to your artistic side of the way you want your house. So that is another sale aspect that 3D printers have over stick built. To come back to the question, are we all going to switch over to this? I don't think so. But is this going to disrupt house manufacturers? Yes. The question is how fast, how soon are we going to see neighborhoods with a trolley system where they plop down house 1, then go to the house 2, plop that down, plop 3 down, plop 4 down, all in like a railway system that allows the whole neighborhood to be built up by that 3D printer day after day after day after day. You could create a whole neighborhood in a month with full amount of houses and not have that much labor, just people putting in the windows, people putting in roofs. It's definitely going to change the way we look at houses. I want to leave you with this. I watch a lot of documentaries, and there's one on, I think his name is Jacques Fresco, and he was a futurist back in the day, and I really liked his documentary. And he did futuristic city planning, and he's got all these models and everything else. The funny thing is he predicted 3D printed housing in a way, and I'll show you the picture up here. He predicted this back in like the 70s and 80s. He knew that we would make larger machines that would just extrude houses, and that's where we're at now. These 3D printers are going to be able to mass produce housing very quickly, very efficiently, and very cost effectively. So I leave you with this. There's visionaries out there everywhere. And if you can connect with them, please do. And if you agree or disagree with this philosophy or this vision of the future, leave a comment down below. I'd love to have a conversation about all this stuff and 3D printing and where it's going in the future. This video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe down below. We got a lot more videos on future tech, and I'm going to leave you with this. Be you, make, share, and repeat. See you next time. Bye-bye.